help so many youth around this area.
I knew he was into that, yeah. But I mean, I just have tremendous respect for him. He was lucky to survive the war as a Marine. He saw so much combat.
We are honoring him in 2 weeks, inducting him into the Legends of Carolina Martial Arts Hall of Fame in West Columbia. You're more than welcome to join all the Irmo police chiefs for the past 30 years. This is Chief Lee Park. Used to be chief.
This chief lives in his old house.
He lives in his old house. I've been there. This is the chief in the 1970s. This is Irmo Police Chief Frank Lee Park.
I thought I've met all the Irmo police.
This is one of the former mayors, Don Lovett.
Right, George Plasma.
We're going to be honoring Al Cross. I think the world of him, and I've known him for many years.
What mayor immediately followed you? Maxie Carter?
David Wright.
When were you the mayor here? In the 70s? Okay.
Bob Lyon will be there next Saturday as well. Talking to him on the phone last night. But Al Cross is a wonderful.
Who preceded you as mayor? That's what I thought. Okay. You know, he passed away.
That's his father.
Oh, Furman Young? Oh, I guess you know that then, don't you? You got the word on that, didn't you?
Seven. I will call the, well, first of all, we got a public hearing on the land that we're changing the zoning on tonight. So if anyone, is anybody signed that thing, Jake? Whit? Oh, you got him? Okay, on the public hearing, Stan Mack.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Stan Mack. I sell commercial real estate with Southern Visions Realty. I represent Mr. Don Kuhn, who owns the 37 acres that we have on Kuhn Road, and we're subdividing, cutting 8 acres out, and selling to a gentleman from Greenville, South Carolina, to open a golf cart sales center. He's here if you have any questions to ask him. Don Kuhn, who owns it, is from the Chapin, Irmo area. He now resides in Geneva, Florida. So Julia Rain with Loveless Yarborough is here, who's representing the buyer. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Y'all have any questions?
I think.
Thank you.
Thank you,
right.
Stan.
And Jason Branham.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Good. So yeah, my name is Jason Branham. I live in right off Coon Road in the Palmerston subdivision, and also happen to serve on the Richland County Planning Commission. It's my first Irmo Town Council meeting, so thank you for having me. And I'm not necessarily here to speak for or against the application. But I know this is the third reading, so I don't know how much discussion there's already been regarding the request, but another concerned citizen asked me if I would just come check in on things here, this being the third reading and there being some proximity to residential areas in the surrounding area. So, I mean, I know that state law would have you consider the application in light of your comprehensive plan, which I assume you have as a town, and I'm not sure how different you are from the Richland County Planning Commission, the factors that we would consider, that our county council would consider regarding, the district designations and the surrounding properties and the need and the justification and the effect on surrounding properties and all those sorts of things. So if it's too much to ask, I understand. I know I'm here late, but I would really appreciate a discussion about those things so I could take that back and share with my neighbors. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And next is Jim Foster.
I really don't have anything to say. I didn't mean to sign that.
Okay, all right. And then Barbara Waldman.
Good evening. I have several comments that I wanted to make about ordinance 19-09. The first is just to let you know that I oppose changing this to general commercial, that I think that there are other options that we have, such as changing it to neighborhood commercial or something that will avoid getting into the multi-unit housing aspect of general commercial at this point, since there has been a lot of input from citizens about being concerned about that aspect of the general commercial zoning. My second comment is that I think that the ordinance actually may need to be worded more specifically to define which 8-acre part of that 37 to 38 acres is actually being rezoned. Because if you read the actual ordinance, at least what was presented on the agenda, it doesn't specify. It just says an 8-acre portion. Another comment that I have is, I understand that that is one plot of land, TMS R033-00 or 00-03-07. And I guess I don't understand how we can rezone a portion of a piece of property. Wouldn't that piece of property need to be first subdivided into discrete pieces? And then that discrete piece is the 8 acres that is being rezoned. Another question I have has to do with the coordination between the town of Irmo zoning and Richland County zoning. When I looked up that plot of land on the Richland County, what's on their website under the current land development code and use, the primary zoning of that particular plot of land on Coon Road is rural, is a rural district. And so I guess I don't understand how we can have one zoning in Richland County that calls it rural and defines what can be there, and a different zoning for the town of Irmo. So if that could be explained or just made a little clearer, that would be helpful. Because their RU district is intended to provide areas of low density agricultural uses and very low density single family detached residential home construction. So again, I'm confused about how we can just go in there and rezone a piece of a large tract of land for general commercial when it's currently zoned as a rural district by Richland County. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is everyone who has signed up for the public hearing. So I will close out the public hearing and call the meeting to order, and I will recognize Councilman Mark Pouliot to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to serve this community this day. We ask for your wisdom, your guidance, clarity of thought, focus, and the strength to do your will. May our actions be just and honorable in your sight, and help us to reflect your heart of service to this town. In the precious name of Jesus and for the sake of his reputation, we pray. Amen.
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 And next on the meeting is the reading of the minutes from June 18th. Is there a motion for approval?
I make a motion.
And a second.
Second.
And any discussion, changes, deletions, anything?
Are we talking about the 18th?
Yeah, the 18th.
Okay.
All in favor then of the 18th, June 18th minutes being approved as written, do so with show of hand. Next is the June 24th. Is there a motion for them to be approved as written? And then if we need to change them, we can change them.
So moved.
And second,
I'll second it.
any changes or deletions or questions or comments? I have one. Under A, appointment of attorney, says the vote to appoint Mr. Chip Burns was 4 and Mr. Walker chose not to vote. According to our ordinance, if somebody doesn't vote, that is registered as a vote in the affirmative. And also then it says the vote to nominate Mr. We never did actually take a vote at that time. We talked about it, but we discussed we couldn't vote because we'd already filled the position. I'm not 100% sure how to rewrite that, but we never did vote on Epting because we'd already filled the seat, if I'm correct and I remember. So we may need to go back and look at that little section there and change that. What does anybody else?
I remember what you're saying, and I think we can trust Renee to reword it. The first person nominated, which was Mr. Burns, we voted on, he won.
Right.
So that was it.
Yeah, so that filled the, and when somebody does not vote, according to our last changes we made,
That's an
their count is voted in the affirmative, so it'd really be, and I don't know whether to say he chose not to vote, but his vote would be counted as the affirmative, or just change it to unanimous, or what?
You can remove the next paragraph,
Correct.
the
Right.
vote to
Oh, okay.
nominate.
Correct.
Just delete it.
All right, so I'll make a motion then that we remove that last sentence, the vote to nominate Joe Ipton, all the way through opposition. And then also, where it says Mr. Walker chose not to vote, put comma, his vote will be counted in the affirmative. Does that sound?
Yep.
So, I made a motion. Is there a second on that?
Second it.
Any discussion? I'm gonna write this down real quick.
I'm happy Mr. Burns is here.
Let's see if he'll be happy after.
All right, all in favor then of that amendment to the June 24th meeting, or minutes, do so with show of hand. And any other amendments or deletions, changes? All in favor then of them minutes being approved as amended, do so with show of hand. Next is the administrative briefing. Mr. Brown, anything on the briefing you need to add, or?
Yes, sir. Just one thing. I've been in communication with CSX Railroad. We are trying to come to some sort of an agreement to get the crossing at Royal Tower, the adjacent to Woodrow Street, repaired. They're not really eager to jump on that right now. They've done it 3-4 times here in the last 10 years, and they just don't like redoing it over and over and over. But it's pretty bad out there, so let's hope for the best.
Yeah. Dillard, John Dillard, I think is his name. I know we had talked about them big old metal plates. Did they know what I'm talking about, or did they say anything about that, or?
No, I was talking to Mr. Edwards down in Jacksonville. I haven't been able to get a hold of Mr. Dillard. He's our local guy.
Right.
And find out about the plates, so don't know.
Okay.
Don't forget about Jakey Knotts. He's the only one to ever get anything approved by the railroad.
Any other questions of Mr. Brown on the briefing? And amendments to the agenda, any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. Next, we have a Consideration of communications. Before we go into that one, does anybody else have one that they want to do or Ed bring up? We have some proclamations, or we have one proclamation to give in honor of Mr. Al Karst. I also want to say, and I got this is a copy of the minutes from February 10th, 1972, when Al Karst was sworn in. And I was going to give this to the family if they're here. But this is the minutes. One page.
Wow.
And I think there was like 3 discussions. It was kind of simpler back then, but it was kind of neat when I looked at all that. Things have changed as far as freedom of information. It wasn't around back then, and things were different, but it was kind of neat just looking at what the minutes used to look like. And I don't know that their meetings were shorter, but I'm sure they probably were. If we want to, we'll go down here, and then Brian Penn. And if you want to say something before we get up here first to the podium, if you'd like to kind of talk about something or tell everybody about the thing next week and do that, then we can come up here and do that.
I look like a tough guy, but I'm not. I'm honored to be here today, Mayor, in your presence. We have the current police chief, Don Perry, here. Also have former Mayor Don Lovett that served during Al Karst's time, and former police chief Frank Leapart joining us. They were good friends of Al Karst. Al Karst is a legend, not just in martial arts, but through his military service and his civil service and everything he's done for the town of Irmo. My wife and I had, I don't know what word to use, the blessing, the ability. Several years ago, we founded the Legends of Carolina Martial Arts, which is a hall of fame for the martial arts pioneers in the Carolinas from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. It was my vote this year to induct Al Karst. Al Karst, I hate to use the term silently, quietly being forgotten about, but I feel like in some ways his name was starting to dwindle away. And I felt it my responsibility to further keep his name alive. Chief Perry has helped me tremendously to get a hold of his family, which I have. They'll be here next weekend on the 27th. His son, his niece. We are going to be inducting him in West Columbia. In that process, to keep it brief, I, over the past 6 months, again with Chief Perry's assistance, have located, communicated, and met with, and many times they've opened their homes to me, every single living former police chief and former mayor of the town of Irmo, and I can name them all. I've memorized them in order. I can almost tell you what years they've served. They have opened their hearts to not only me to make this project happen, but they've opened their hearts to remembering Al Karst, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And Mayor King, I appreciate your efforts to make this proclamation a reality. We're going to hang it in our dojo for all of the martial artists that come through the Carolinas to see. We've got a copy that we're going to give to the family so they know that their family member will always be remembered. I honor you guys. I appreciate you. My mother lives in Irmo still to this day. I lived in Irmo for almost 30 years, probably 20-something years. I love Irmo. I'm at y'all's disposal if I can ever help you with anything. Next Saturday, the 27th of July, in my dojo in West Columbia, we're blessed. We have a 10,000 square foot dojo. We've got seating for about 150 people. There'll be martial artists from all over the Carolinas coming. Chief Perry has graciously allowed one of the new patrol cars to come out. My vision for the Irmo portion of this is to have an epic group picture of all of the police chiefs lined up in order. Leapart was the first one, and then we have Jerry Cameron from Florida will be here. Ray Nash, David Byrd will be there. Interim Chief Don Murphy will be there. David Graham lives in Chapin, he will be there. Andy Blackwell, Brian Buck, Joe Nates, Don Perry. And I've even got a little inkling of hope that I'm going to find a chief that was around before Leapart that's still with us. And all of the mayors will be with us. God bless you guys. God bless Al Karst. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You will come down here if you want to. Brian, and
Thank
do you do? I'm Mark Pouliot. Nice to meet you. Why don't you go ahead? Right there. Yes. Yes.
I've never felt so safe around so many chiefs and mayors and everybody else. Let's look at the gentleman in the middle first. Naomi, can you step in the middle of the table? Look at my daughter.
She must take after her mother.
Wow.
Let me read this so the public can know. This is proclamation to Mr. Alcars, recognizing the legacy of Mr. Alcars for many years of outstanding service and induction into the Legends of Carolina Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Whereas Mr. Alcars, a decorated World War II Marine veteran, decided to make the town of Irmo his residence for over 40 years, moving with his family to Fork Avenue. And whereas he was elected to serve on the Irmo Town Council from 1972 until 73. It was only 2 years back then, which was marked by exemplary dedication for the best interests of the community. And whereas he saw a need in his community and decided to share his abilities, talents, skills by opening a Taekwondo dojo in Irmo, where he taught generations of students not only the skills of Taekwondo, but also the importance of citizenship and community caretaking by insisting that his students participate in community cleanup events as part of their training in Taekwondo. And whereas Mr. Cars followed his beliefs in supporting public safety long after he retired from teaching Taekwondo by visiting the Irmo Police Department and the Irmo Town Hall and being an excellent example of citizenship for all to see. Now therefore, be it resolved, the Mayor and Council of the Town of Irmo, by this resolution, recognize and honor Mr. Alcars upon the occasion of his posthumous induction into the Legends of Carolina Martial Arts Hall of Fame. In witness thereof, we have hereunto signed our hands and caused this official seal of the Town of Irmo to be affixed on the 16th day of July, 2019, and then signed by all council members.
An honor. An honor. Thank you all very much. Thank you, sir. No, can you take a couple more pictures real quick while we're up here, while I'm holding? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
So honored to have former mayor Lovett, wherever he's at over here, and former chief Lee Park. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
This guy instructed my son in karate.
Oh, cool.
And this one's wife taught me in 4th grade. I can't wait to see her. Such a small world. God bless all.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't
very
get to
much.
meet you. I'm
I'm
Mark
Brian
Pouliot.
Pennant.
Hi, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Brian.
Thank you all. Thank you, sir. We're going to stay for the remainder of the council meeting. I'll take you home afterwards.
Okay.
That was
Sir?
Sparky.
Edward Howard will be there as well. He's having his kitchen 2 weeks. Every chief will be there. Forgot your name, and I apologize.
And let's see.
All right, where are we?
Next is presentation by citizen for agenda items. And let's see. Agenda items. Barbara Waldman.
Good evening again. I just wanted to address ordinance number 1909, which I made some comments earlier, and also ordinance 1913, which is under new business. The first reading is under new business. And again, I just want to ask the council to be very conscientious when they look at changing zoning, particularly in the case of 1913, where it's being changed from neighborhood commercial to general commercial. Just seeing what's on the agenda, there's no explanation for why that is being done, so I would hope that you can explain that to us when you get to there. But again, there's a major concern just about changing to general commercial, because it seems like once we change it to that, there's no kind of going back. So I just would like to ask you to be very conscious of what you're doing for the future in terms of those zoning changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eric Thickinger.
Hello, council. All right. Ooh. So I have a couple of notes on the agenda items on 10C. I understand that that purchase is coming under state contract. Someone that sells to municipalities, I understand the process of getting onto a state contract, and that does not necessarily mean that it's the best price available. So I hope that you share with us the due diligence around securing the best pricing for the town. And really nothing else of note except for 12B, discussion on referendum questions. So that's an interesting one. It doesn't really say what the referendum question will be. However, as there really seems to only be one issue that is still up for debate, that was decided kind of in a contentious fashion and under threats of lawsuit and violations of this and that under housing. My assumption is that that's the referendum question as to whether or not we should allow multifamily housing in general commercial. And if you are considering, Mr. Mayor, putting a referendum question for multifamily housing in general commercial, and you think that that's something that the town residents should vote on, then I applaud you and encourage that effort. As there's really nothing else that I can think of that's highly contentious and isn't already decided and established and in place across the community. My guess is that it must be on allowing multifamily housing in general commercial. And certainly that will give you a lot of room to make a decision based on this is what the town believes versus the people who attend the meetings and or just one meeting or multiple meetings. And then you can do it outside of the cloud of the contentious issue as it was raised the last time. So I applaud that. Thank you.
Thank you. And no one else? So,
We got one.
oh,
George Glassmeyer, 100 Denbeck Road. First thing, I want to endorse the proclamation for Mr. Karst. I knew him very well. I'm aware of his community service vis-a-vis the youth of this town, but what I know him better for is a somewhat of a World War II historian. I spoke to him a number of times about his service during World War II as a Marine, and he fought in 3 major campaigns in the Pacific. And again, as a student of those campaigns, I can tell you that those Marines endured some horrendous conditions, and the casualty rates were phenomenal. And it's amazing that he survived one of them, let alone 3. And we owe him a debt of gratitude, a tremendous debt of gratitude, just for his service in World War II, in my view. Moving on further down the agenda, I'm a bit concerned about the discussion to ban plastic bags in the town. I'm not opposed to banning plastic bags in this town, but it's my understanding that Richland County already has some legislation underway to do just that, and I don't think the town needs to be enacting duplicative legislation that the county is presumably going to enact anyway, because then we're going to be charged with enforcing it, and if we can get the county to enforce their own ordinance rather than us do it, I think that's the way to go. Finally, I'm a bit concerned about the executive session topic for land purchase. The last time I recall seeing a land purchase on the agenda was when the town purchased the land where the community park is, and I was vehemently against that. In fact, as you people that have been around here for a while will know that I was opposed to that park 2 parks ago. And I'm fearful that there's a move afoot to construct yet another park. And even if that's not the case, the town of Irmo does not need to be in the real estate business. We had this discussion back when the town finally sold the key shop up here. So please bear those considerations in mind as you discuss that topic in executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. And, whoop.
Hello, this is Wade Deloach, 156 Finsbury Road. Just a couple of things on the rezoning for the property over there. This could pertain to any property, actually, but this was brought to me by a few citizens. One of them is, are pending rezoning requests and corresponding documentations available online? If not, could they be for the public to see? The second one would be, would they please consider updating their pending rezoning signage? These would be perpendicular to the road, and evidently where the sign is now out there, people driving by can't hardly see it. It's not really visible or hard to read for people. And the third thing was, regarding response third reading on the zone change Coon Road, if petitioner decides not to put in golf cart sales with this zoning change, what else could he put in there? In other words, what they're saying is, if y'all approve it, and at the last minute he changes his mind about golf cart sales, can he put something else in there? And that was the concern. I don't know. And maybe you guys can answer that better. Thank you.
Thank you. And no one else? Next is third reading of ordinance 1909. This is the one that has to do with the Coon Road property. We will start with, is there a motion for third reading?
So move.
And a second? I will second. So you can go, yeah, first.
I've been out there several times because I was very interested in exactly where it was, and it took a while to find it because the signs weren't up when I was out there. I understand the signs are up now, so it's easier to find, although I saw Mr. Mack's sign and I knew I was in the right place. I think the golf cart company is a good business. I think it would be viable there. I'm not sure how people are going to get to it. I guess you're going to have some type of directional something or other to do that. But when I went out there, I was looking for houses nearby, and there's only one that I found. And I tried to go see the people, but they have a fair amount, quite a few animals in the yard that are not caged or fenced or whatever. So I really didn't get to talk to anybody, but they're across the street actually on Ballantyne Road. And the side of the house faces Coon Road, and it's quite a ways off. I didn't see any other houses near this property that would be in contention. And then yesterday, I got emails about the cemetery. And the cemetery is not near this, but it is, it's there, and it's chained off, so it's, but the business will not be near it, or it will not be disturbed, because it's not.
It's down towards the bottom. You can see the little X up on the screen, that marking where there were some headstones.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the concerns I had, my fears were allayed by where it is and how it's parallel to I-26. It's probably a good idea for the land.
You through? I made the second, I'll go. As far as getting to it, I mean, you can get to it off Coon Road and off Broad River and off whatever that other is, Western Lane over there. And like a lot of businesses on Broad River, And even that one I mentioned before, I think it's Castle Brothers, didn't I mention, is that the one?
That's right.
It's the heat and air. And they bought the land all the way back to the interstate just so they would be able to put up signs and have visibility back there. You know, at some point down the road, who knows, that exit or that crossover right there, and also the one up at West Shady Grove, DOT has said at some point they would put an interchange in one of those, but that could be 50 years down the road, and I think it was the one up there near Walmart that had a higher thing, but I don't, you know, none of that, I mean, all of that's so speculative. But for right now, I mean, they can get to it like everybody else on Broad River Road, just going to it that way. I did want to mention some of the stuff and answer some of it that somebody had brought up. As far as it being changed to neighborhood commercial, it couldn't do that because they wouldn't be able to put that size building in there. Neighborhood commercial is a zoning that's normally next to residential neighborhood, but it also means smaller businesses as far as square footage. Anytime you get into a certain square foot, it won't go into neighborhood commercial. It has to go into general commercial. So that's why they've asked for that classification. As far as which 8 acres, it doesn't show on the ordinance, but that's why we required them to do this thing here. And from my understanding, what they're asking really is for us to change the zoning. Then he's going to buy the land and close on the land and then do his thing. Because he didn't want to buy it, we weren't going to change it, so to speak. And that's why they kind of surveyed off that one track so that we'd all know exactly which track it is. As far as how we can rezone that, I mean, we can rezone the whole thing or we can rezone a portion of it as long as we have a good survey or a good definition. You know, even if it says 100 foot this way, 200 foot that way, 500 foot that way, you know, as long as we can determine what it is, and we can change that portion. As far as the 2 governing bodies, anything that's in Richland County is under their governing body. Anything that's in Irmo or Columbia or Lexington or any other town is under that town's governing body. So we changed that zoning many years ago when it got annexed into our town to what we felt like it needed to be if it ever got developed. At the time, we gave it that PDD zoning because the people didn't really know what they wanted to do with it. They wanted to bring it into town. Because it backs up to residential neighborhood on down this way, if we gave it all, quote, general commercial, which we could have done, then they could have had a big, I won't say shopping center, but something to that effect right up to Caveman's Creek. We felt like this was a safer way of doing it, giving it PDD, and then at a later date, when they wanted to develop it, then they'd come to us with this big plan. Of course, since all that time, things have come up about the PDD in the state, and state laws have changed and everything else. We may end up having to change this at some point to a mixed use, which is a lot of what people are going to. There's a whole lot more guidelines and rules on PDD development as opposed to mixed use. But if we tried to change it at the time and change it all to mixed use, and then try to, you know, so it was easier just to change his portion, and then whenever Planning Commission decides how we're going to revamp, are we going to keep PDD, get rid of PDD, and change it to mixed use or whatever, then we'll do that to that part. I think one of the other questions is, on any general commercial property that's in town, whether we're changing it or it's already zoned, anything that can go in general commercial can go in general commercial. So if somebody owns land, and say this particular individual, and something happens, and even they build a building in there 20 years, 10 years, 5, and then go out of business, you know, somebody else can come in there and buy and build or use it for whatever is allowed in general commercial at that time. So, I mean, that's always true in anything. If it's zoned a certain way, and we got a lot of land in town zoned general commercial that could get developed one day a little bit contrary to what we like. But the property's been zoned for many years that way, before our time too, so I don't know. But I think that answers most of the questions. As far as the update on the zoning sign, making it more legible, I do know there is a minimum size on those signs. When you put up a zoning change sign out on the property, there's a minimum height and width and legible print and all like that. I know you got to meet that guideline there. As far as making it bigger, I mean, that could probably be done too, but no matter how big you make it, and if you make it too big, people are going to stop and read it in the middle of the road, so to speak, which that's one reason why they don't want them where people can read them in a car. They want you to pull over and get out and go look at it and read it instead of, not paying attention when you're driving type thing. But as far as this, there is a business that wants to buy it. It's a golf cart business. We do live off, quote, business license in our town. If somebody wants to buy a property and put a business on it, that is kind of what we're always looking for. At some point, if we didn't have business license, most towns have property tax and business license, and if we don't have enough business license revenue, then you're always looking at property tax and what to do about that. But I think it's a good fit. It's in a good location. It's along the interstate. At some point, this other land will probably get more attractive. Everything's getting better out there. The economy's getting better. People are building, and
It's a good thing. Again, I think because of where this is, you're always going to have a commercial property there. For you to build residences, a residential apartment complex there with the noise from the highway, I think it would be unlikely. And you're going to get more money for it as a commercial property, a true commercial property, as opposed to a residential. That's the only thing that I wanted to add there.
Any more discussion? Back to this. All in favor then of third and final reading for ordinance 1909, do so with show of hands. Next is second reading of ordinance 1911. This is the one that has to do with the peddlers and solicitors. Is there a motion for second reading?
So moved.
And a second. Well, I'm not going to second. I would, but I think I'm not for it. So anyway, motion dies for lack of second. Next is first reading of 1912. Is there a motion? Which one is this? Oh, this is the one, Bob can explain it once we get a first and second on it. Has to do with changes in the state fireworks law. Is there a motion for first reading?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Bob, will you let everybody know kind of what's going on here?
Well, if you look on the ordinance, the two, we've deleted the two ordinances that have been repealed by the state. And we've added and replaced with the one that we want to reference, because our ordinance references state statute. That's all we're doing here.
The state deleted those other two
Correct.
statutes and then replaced it with this one. So we're just kind of making ours match what the state now says.
Yeah, we're not changing anything else in our ordinance, only what we're referencing under state statute.
Any more discussion, questions? All in favor then of first reading on 1912, do so with show of hands. And next is first reading of 1913. This is the one, and for people who are looking at the map and may not know exactly, this is where the old chamber shopping center is, right up here next to the bank. That little one corner
Yep.
is the BB&T. The next little slide is Irmo Outdoor Lock. And then that one corner is where the shopping center is. the corner of Lexington and Carlisle is where that little white house sits over here. And right catty-corner from that is the Young Chapel Church. Somebody is buying that property on Lake Murray and Carlisle, and they're buying 1922-0702, and they're buying the White House. So those 3 tracks. And
So these 3 right here.
yeah. And way they're going to rebuild, there's a parking lot going on the 3rd track on Lexington. Part of the building that's going to be built on this front track is reaching over into that. And because that's neighborhood commercial, it exceeds the square footage and yada, yada, yada. It's only a small portion, but just to make sure nothing gets caught up in that's why it's on the agenda to change that to general commercial, and then it's all, and then they can build their building.
And it's surrounded by general commercial.
Yeah, and it's surrounded. I don't know why that was left years ago, but I guess nobody needed it changed, so they didn't. They weren't building on it, actually. I think it's just parking lot back there.
Can I ask? I'd like to know, how big are those 3 properties together?
Acre-wise? Well, let's go ahead while we're here and get a motion in a second, and then if we want to ask them to come up
All right.
again. Is there a motion and a second? Or is there a motion first,
So moved.
and then a second?
I second it.
All right. Are these the owners of the property? Are the purchasers or buyers?
Developers.
Oh, okay.
I want to say it's probably 2 acres. I mean, for the whole block right there, from one end to the other. So, but I'm not sure because I don't have any. Do you have any?
Yeah, it's about that. We had a survey done that we have not gotten back yet, but the building size would barely exceed, so we wouldn't need the general commercial.
Yeah.
And it would barely touch that back sliver.
Do you care to share what you think you're going
It
to?
would be traditional retail. 2 multi-tenant would be the idea. Nothing's finalized, and it would be just traditional retail, nothing crazy, just.
So are they remodeling that building or tearing it all down?
Oh, it's contaminated, so the building needs to be demoed, and then all that contamination from the laundromat that used to be there, we're going to have to take the dirt out, do all that, and then rebuild a new building.
Wow. That's expensive to do.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And then from my understanding, the building where the house is right now, that's going to be overflow parking or extra parking or whatever you'd call it. And the
Employee
building
overflow
will be
parking.
on these 2 things. Any more discussion?
And we're going to have to put in a raised median which will help traffic.
Yeah, that's
We've already
right,
talked to the
yeah.
DOT about that, so
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be expensive.
I'm glad you think it's viable enough to do all that work. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for Irmo. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor then of first reading on 1913, do so with show of hands. And next is the approval to purchase 3 police vehicles in the amount of $79,997. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
And a second. I will second. And I don't know, Bob, if you want to mention anything, or does the chief want to mention?
Well, the chief may want to, but just so you know, I mean, someone had mentioned the price earlier, but this includes everything that goes in the vehicle. They're police interceptor cars, and then also the Durango. But it comes with cages, it comes with cameras, it comes with all the lights, siren. So all that stuff is an additional cost than just buying the car on the lot.
It
So
is.
that's why everything's already included in here, ready to put on the road for police duties.
So it's a
This is a very
turnkey
good-
operation. Have you done other checking to see how the state contract goes against, if you went over to Love, Chief, if you went over to Love yourself and tried to buy a police vehicle from them?
Well, Love wouldn't have a Chevy. I mean, only the Dodges are on state contract now.
Oh, I don't want,
Very expensive.
all right.
We're going the cheapest route we can with the Dodge Chargers right now. They're the cheapest on the bids at 25. I believe we're gonna get out there. The camera systems in every car is $5,000. Lights, sirens, cage, wraps.
No, that,
It's not a cheap venture to,
we've bought a lot of police cars, and this is a very good price.
Yeah,
The
3 of them
lowest
for
I've
that price,
seen
I was
in
kind of,
years.
that's why I stuttered when I looked at it, because I thought it was a little
It
bit
should
low.
be 90 to 100
Yeah, because they're
with the
typically in
others
the
that we
30.
bought.
We tried to save as much.
Well, you did good.
And I think too, somebody had asked me, and I'll go ahead and bring that up about the Durango. And I had kind of misinformed them too, because I had always heard some of the police cars, you can't put people in the back seat because they're so little. That's why sometimes we get some of the other vehicles. But actually, I think Bob told me that one was going to be used for one of the investigators, and they had to put all their
Equipment in there.
stuff. Their,
I see.
their
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be replacing a 2010 Ford Explorer with a 2019 Dodge Durango. So we get 9 years out of a police car. That's doing pretty good.
That's pretty good.
How many miles on the Explorer?
110,000, sorry.
Just broken in.
Just broken in.
I got 300,000 on my Ford Explorer. 300,000.
You don't chase bad guys.
These are pound miles. Let's add times 2 to everything. If you
Yeah.
get 100,000 out of a car, the transmission is stop and go. You know, it's a lot of wear and tear on a car if you do 100,000 in a town the size we have.
and a railroad track.
Yeah.
That it's not level
And
and full of
And
potholes.
I've asked this question over the years that I've been on council now, why now? But you've done extensive studies, and this is just for the general public. They've done extensive studies as to the wear and tear on these vehicles and when they start really costing money. And for us to get 10 years out of these vehicles is pretty good. I just hate spending the money. I really do.
Are you finished?
Yes, I am.
Oh, in addition to what you're saying, Hardy and I have to look at all the invoices and the bills, and they really get high.
Yeah.
We signed 3 checks today, I think, that had to do with repairs, and it's just not inexpensive to repair anymore. It's,
Yeah,
I
understood.
understand.
Understood.
Yeah, we've always, around 100,000 miles, 110, somewhere in that range, tried to, because at some point they get to where they cost a whole lot of money to, and then you can't get rid of them. You know, if they're not in dilapidated, falling apart shape, like taxi people used to buy them. And other police departments will too, smaller rural ones, if they feel like they can get, 3 or 4 more years out of them before they belly up on them. And some of the places, if you're out in, I won't say Blythewood or Peoria or somewhere, it's flat land, no railroad track. You can probably stretch that. But when you're over here jumping these tracks all the time, it just beats them to pieces. Chapin, the same thing. Theirs are a lot of times in the garage up there because they just.
And we're looking
up.
forward. We're looking forward to the new businesses in town actually generating the revenue so we can pay for these.
We are.
And let's see. Any more discussion? All in favor then of the approval to purchase the 3 police vehicles in the amount of $79,997, do so with show of hands. And presentation by citizens. Let's see. Agenda items. And Mike Ward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to say that thank you for putting the discussion of my letter on your agenda for tonight. I'm encouraged. I wrote it because of what I saw while I attended these meetings. I really do want my government body to be able to act in a professional way, the citizens that come up here to be able to act with respect and compassion for one another. So I wrote my letter. Hopefully it'll turn into a really good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eric Sicklinger.
Hello again. First of all, thank you for the discussion on the police vehicles. To be clear, I wasn't making any accusations that the town wasn't being careful, or that the chief wasn't being careful. I applaud the fact that we can get 10 years out of our vehicles. I can't get 10 out of mine, so I don't know how they do that, but that's good. And certainly it sounds like a good deal. I was just questioning, I was stating the fact that being on state contract does not mean it is the best deal. And then as part of my due diligence and transparency for the residents of Irmo who don't necessarily have access or interest in going on Pacer, I wanted to provide the residents of Irmo an update on US v. Town of Irmo. So there has been a lot of back and forth since the last time we've had an update, mostly around discovery and what the town will provide to DOJ. DOJ is asking for a lot, and the town provided some. It's not my place to make calls. That's the judge's place to make a call as to whether something is discoverable or not. I also wanted to share that the town was providing documents that weren't searchable and didn't include metadata, so it was challenging for DOJ to search through that. And the town asserted its narrow view of discovery, maintained that its unsupported generalized objections are sufficient, attempts to carve out a novel small town exception to the discovery requirements of the federal rules, and misstates the applicability of the legislative and quasi-judicial privileges. So that was the DOJ speaking, not me, to be clear. I don't have nearly the understanding of law to be able to make up a statement like that. So basically, what it seems like to me as a citizen is kind of the standard back and forth in terms of discovery and what the town is going to hand over and what they aren't. And it looks like we'll have an answer from the court as to what's discoverable and what the town needs to deliver soon. So I'll have an update on that more later. Thank you.
Anyone else?
This is where we can talk about anything, right?
Right.
Yeah. Wade Deluxe 156 Finsbury Road. Two things. I don't know if you guys know it, but Chevrolet and Ford has announced that they're going to discontinue making V8s, and a lot of police agencies are worried what they're going to do in the future. Dodge is on the fence. It's going to be interesting. Texas has bought 100,000, and California has bought 100,000 Fords this year just to have in stock.
Oh, wow.
Wish we had that kind of money. I know we don't. But a little lighter note, Handy Hands of Irmo would like to announce that we're going to try to put on a DIY Expo September 6th, and we'd like to do it in the park. Anybody that wants to come out, learn a bit about plumbing, electrical, just anything in general. We're going to have about 7 tents set up. With permission of the town, we'll set up in the park, that far picnic table on the other side of the pond, close to the restrooms. And we're looking for some sponsors. We've already got some people set up. By the end of the month, we will have a website. By the middle of August, we should have our LLC. So we're growing. We're not just a flash in the pan. And we'd like to thank council and everybody that supported us during this cause. Wish we weren't really in need, but we are. And we're going to try to be there when we can. Thank you.
And what was that date again?
September 6th, this Saturday.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Next is a discussion, and Kathy had asked us to be on here. Now, I don't know.
Does everybody have a copy?
I don't. I think I got it on here. What date was it? I'll go back and find it on my email real quick.
June 14th.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure when the email came in.
And let's see, where am I? Don't know. If you want to go ahead, I'll find it while you're.
Well, it's a very well-written letter, and I know that Mike went to a lot of thought, and it's just very good. And we've talked about many of these things before. To make it easy for us, he put the important things in bold type so we would know. But basically, it's about how we react to each other, to the public, and how we all should get along and listen and not interrupt. He starts off, enforce the same rules with all the parties involved. Don't interrupt. And I'm guilty of it too, because we start talking and sometimes you get to a point where you don't quite get it or you didn't quite hear it, and I do it all the time. Now, what'd you say? But we need to curb that. And that has to do with interruptions for us speaking, and sometimes we've even interrupted the public when they were speaking. Sometimes good reason, sometimes not. Respectful language. Avoid direct attacks on people. Direct comments to the council instead of individuals in the audience or on council. And I think that's very important. And we need to heed that warning. He talks about audience. And we've all heard this. Sometimes there's been applause, sometimes there's been a boo. None of that is really needed, and it probably doesn't help anybody's opinion either. I've heard it said many times on Facebook, if you want to change somebody's political opinion, don't get on Facebook and try to do it. And I think it's true here too. Don't boo. You can agree or whatever, but don't do anything inappropriate from the audience or from us that would change someone's opinion of us. And the last two paragraphs are just decorum, to have a professional decorum, and very important, limit the minutes that everyone can speak. Us, the audience, everyone. And I think that'll help a great deal. There have been meetings when we've been here for hours. It was past my bedtime, 11 o'clock or whatever.
Been here past midnight.
Yes.
We have.
And I don't think well then anyway. But he mentions 10 minutes, but then he also mentions 3. And somewhere in between, and maybe it's 5, we ought to limit the amount that we speak and the amount that each person that signs up speaks as well. I think these are all good suggestions, and if y'all need a copy, or if you, maybe, I don't know whether you've got it in your packet or not, it's a very good letter. And after reading it, I thought, okay, I agree with everything. It was very good to read. Do you have a copy?
I do.
You do, okay.
Anyone else?
Julius read it, I know.
May I?
Mm-hmm.
I've been an advocate to follow Robert's rules from the first day that I was sworn in. And what happens is we get off on a tangent, and some here on council have said that they're too stringent. I think if the pendulum has swung to one side, we have to swing it to the other side until decorum can be, so it is in the middle. We've gotten into some very heated discussions, and every one of us has a tendency to be passionate about a specific subject, and I understand that, but we have to conduct ourselves in a business way. We have to let everyone know that this is a business meeting first. That's what it is. It's a business meeting. And pertaining to applauding, it was interesting. I was watching C-SPAN prior to coming to the meeting tonight. And the crowd was actually applauding, and they got gavelled. Applauding in a town like this, in a town setting, can be an intimidation factor. And we want to make sure that everyone with a view has an opportunity to speak. And we don't want that person to be intimidated if they have an opposing view. We're all adults. We should allow an opposing view without jeering, without clapping, without booing. Again, this is meant to be a business meeting. And I believe strongly that we should follow Robert's rules. We should take that pendulum and swing it the other way and follow Robert's rules until we get this right. Again, for the sake of the town, for the sake of the residents who come here, for the sake of the residents that listen over the internet. It's important.
You want to say anything, or?
I second what Mark said, because I've always been an advocate of Robert's rules. When I was in high school, I debated. When I was in college, I debated, and everything was governed by Robert's rules. In the most formal debates, you get to speak 10 minutes. The first speaker speaks 10 minutes. The second speaker speaks 8, and if there's rebuttals, it's 3 minutes, period. And you don't speak past your time limit. That takes points off your score. But we do have some people who get hot under the collar, and it's hard sometimes not to, because everybody has their personal feelings, especially when it concerns your home. And your taxes. And fortunately for us in the town of Irmo, property taxes were eliminated almost 10 years ago, and we survive on business licenses. And that's why we do want more business in the town of Irmo. One thing I noticed recently with the mention that we were getting a new business in the old Piggly Wiggly, the gentleman that managed that Piggly Wiggly is on the board of Mid-Carolina Electric Cooperative, and he was my son's basketball coach when he was in elementary school over at Seven Oaks Park. And Piggly Wiggly made a big mistake when they built there, because the parking is not that great for a large grocery store. But they signed a contract for more years than they were there, and they could not get out of it. That's why the building stayed empty for so long. Piggly Wiggly was still paying the lease. They were allowing AT&T to store switching gear inside that building. The business that is now coming here is called Stars and Stripes, I believe. And I've heard people say it's an adult bowling alley. We've already got a bowling alley. Well, the bowling alley that we have is Anchor Lanes, and Anchor Lanes from the beginning of their being here have survived on league bowling. If you don't go in on a certain date and you're just a citizen who wants to go out and knock some pins down, if the league's there, you don't get to bowl until the leagues finish. This is a family outfit. My grandson went to a birthday party back in May when we were visiting my son in Memphis, and an old grocery store, an old A&P, if you remember the A&P food stores, had been converted into one of these. It had a roller coaster inside. Wow. It had go-karts, all kinds of games of chance and the kids can play. I was really impressed, and the food was good. And they had separate rooms where you could go and eat while the kids are playing, and there was only one way in and one way out, so the security was very good, and they had people walking around that were security. So people have been really talking on Facebook kind of bad about it. I'm just glad to see a business occupy that building and pay the town of Irmo a business license, which keeps all of us from having property taxes. So I can understand when we get a little antsy and contradict each other, but when we banter, sometimes it's because Kathy thinks she's the oldest one up here, and she's not. And she always throws that age thing around. And then Mark.
I'm the only woman. I get prerogative.
That's why I was painting all day at my house. Mark's could have been my son if I had been a little more prolific as a youngster. I'll be 75 in February, and I always talk about historical things because I taught history. And one of the things I've always said is those who do not learn history, whether it's in the classroom or in life, you're doomed to repeat it. And I had many students. I had eighth grade, finally socially promoted. And then when I taught summer school and taught economics and government, there they were again. And I said, I hope you remember what I told you in eighth grade. If you learned it now, same old story when you get in high school. One of my shining examples is Craig Melvin with NBC. Craig was a great kid in eighth grade. He's a fine man now, has 2 children, and his mom and I both have told him, payback. But I applaud Mike for his letter. In fact, I taught Mike's wife in the 8th grade. Makes you feel old when you see these students. And just like Brian Pena that was here promoting the honoring of Al Karst, he was a young man teaching karate at Earwood Studio when my son took karate there. So I remember Brian as a student, as a young man, high school. But that's, I really applaud your letter, Mike. Appreciate it.
A couple things I wanted to add and say, Robert's rules, state law requires us to adopt rules, so we have to. And in Robert's rules, there's a lot of them out there. We go by newly revised 11th edition. The basics of Robert's rules is the same, but if you read each version, they have different interpretations, different, we'll call it teachings, but different explanations of what that actually means. And then when you also look at Robert's rules, they're made to apply to any type of meeting. You have to kind of figure out, does it apply to yours? Whether it's a church board meeting or a state house meeting or a Senate meeting or anywhere like that, any governing body. Some are applicable and some are not. The state house and the Senate both have their own rules. They came up with their own. Instead of going by Robert's rules, they just came up with their own. And some people suggest that towns should do the same thing, but that gets kind of very difficult when you're trying to come up with 300 rules to fit your town. You can just adopt Robert's rules. But one of the things I think makes good sense, and it's kind of why we do it too, even though you have Robert's rules, you also have a town ordinance. You also have state law and federal law. Federal law may say you have to do something. State law may say you have to do something. Robert's rule says that you can put anything on the agenda at night or at the meeting and put it on the agenda. State law says we can't do that. So there's a lot of stuff that Robert's rules allows that state law doesn't. And then procedures too for discipline and going through and all like that. It doesn't matter if you're going to gavel somebody if they're not going to pay attention. So the first thing is we got to have respect for one another and respect for that. If we don't, then it doesn't matter what rules you have, where the rules are. It's kind of like any other law. If people don't abide by the law and they want to speed, they speed, and you got a ticket or whatever. But if they're not going to abide by the rules, it doesn't matter. Like guns. If people want to carry guns, they do. If they want to do whatever, there can be a law against doing this and that and the other, but they still break a law. Rob banks, shoot each other, do all that stuff. The municipal association is always putting out stuff, and they have classes down there for what they call newly elected and all this stuff and updates and everything else. They put out some books, and some of these are, kind of whatever, but there's 3 columns here of stuff that they say how to council meeting decorum. It comes out of their book. This one actually came out of the Uptown, but they have a book called How to Conduct an Effective Meeting. And they'll go over stuff like never speak without being recognized. Do not engage in an argument with another speaker. All questions are directed to the presiding officer, not towards each other. Refrain from making certain remarks and all like that, and don't make personal remarks. Don't argue, blah, 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 blah. Don't interrupt the speaker. So we can have Robert's rules, but if you don't know them or if you don't pay attention to them or whatever, we're there. One of the things I would suggest, and I'm going to be working on it by 4 weeks, I guess, before we meet again, is trying to take some of this stuff that's in Robert's rules and putting it in our ordinance. It's easy to go to our ordinance and read it instead of going to Robert's rules and trying to find it. Robert's rules is,
It's a big book.
this book here.
Yes.
And there may be 15 chapters or sections that have to do with one particular thing. And you got to read them all, and then you got to figure out which one is applicable and which one is not. If you do it in an ordinance form and you put it in your ordinance, then it's easy to go to that ordinance, and it's easy for everybody to look at it, whether the audience or the public. And the thing that has to be remembered as well, like you said, this is a council meeting. It is not a public meeting. It's a council meeting. It is open to the public, but it's a council meeting. The minutes that I read or showed years ago, our town council used to meet in this building back here. Council members were allowed, and the secretary, minute person, was allowed, town clerk or whoever that was at that time. Nobody else was allowed, and they would tell you to leave if you went. That's what they did. You walked into a meeting, they asked you who you were, what are you here for? Sorry, you can't be here. It's a council meeting. Goodbye. That was what was done years ago. That's the way it was. And not just here in Irmo, but a lot of places. Kind of like going to a church eldership meeting. You walk in there, they're probably going to tell you to get out of there. It's for elders only or whatever. But things have changed over the years for good and for good reasons. They also, in that same book, they talk about all these things that you can do to have an effective meeting. They also got a thing on how to disrupt a meeting. And it says, speaking without being recognized by the presiding officer, interrupting speakers, carrying on private conversation, asking questions, making comments not relevant to the business at hand, making frivolous motions, arguing with the presiding officer, making unnecessary points of order, making political speeches, refusing to abide by a legitimate ruling of the order or order of the presiding officer. So they have a little section on best way to disrupt the meeting so that people know. Sometimes it's easier to know what's breaking the law than try to figure out, what am I supposed to do? What you're not supposed to do is this. So I'm going to try to take some of these things and take some of that council decorum stuff and the ones that I think are most applicable to us and to bodies like ours, small towns, town councils, and put them in a way that we can vote on those. One of the things he brought up too, we changed some of our stuff years ago with our presentation by citizens where we put in order, who could speak and how. We did 10 minutes. I'm not going to say it, but I am going to say it. I didn't think that would work out good, and it didn't. But because most places, I asked Bob and everybody, they got me stuff. Somebody else actually sent this one. This is School District 5. Casey, Batesburg, Leesville, they got a big to do. Town of Lexington, West Columbia, and town of Bluffton, And we got a bunch just from different places, School District 1, Lexington School District 1. Some of these are very good. You can probably read them and go, wow, they must have had a bunch of trouble. Durham actually charges council members dollars, takes it out of their paycheck for gaveling and arguing and stuff like that. That's kind of the extreme, but I'm guessing there was a reason it got to that extreme. I don't know. Batesburg-Leesville has a whole procedure on removing a council member for being disruptive. They tried to clarify that into their ordinance so they didn't have to understand state law. A lot of that probably is overboard, but for their town and things that happened up there, we probably know that's why they did it. But my suggestion would be to go back to 3 minutes, which is pretty much what everybody does. The school district also, and I'd have to kind of, not only do they address council members and their decorum, they address the public participation. And they have some stuff in there about, different words like derogatory, I can't remember, not being uncivil, contentious, disruptive, and other words are used in that manner to describe what the public is not allowed to do when they get to the podium. Some of that I think we need to incorporate. I'm going to come up with what I think is comfortable, safe, in between, not so whatever. But y'all may want to ask Bob to get you some of these copies, look into some other towns, get him to give you some of this stuff, so that when we talk about it, we can kind of find a happy medium between all that. But I do want to take some of this stuff right off of their meeting decorum and how to disrupt a meeting, blend them together, and I will probably do the 3 minutes, and that'll have to do with town council. As far as the time frame, not that there is already a rule that says every council member gets to speak once, and then everybody else can speak a second time if you want to rebut or whatever somebody else said. And then after the second time, technically by state law and by everything else, you can call for the question, Robert's Rules, after everybody's spoken twice. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. I don't know about the 10 minutes on us. I probably spoke right at that. I think Julius has probably spoke at that. So it's easy to get, when you're talking about whatever it may be, especially on discussions, because they're a little bit different than voting. I've always been told, and I kind of fall under the same idea, is when you come to a council meeting, we should be able to vote, yea or nay, right away. I mean, we should be prepared and stuff. Yes, it's good to hear from other people, and it might change your mind, and it's good for the public to know what we're talking about. But technically, you should be ready. And when somebody comes to the podium, depending on which item they want to speak on, they should be ready to address and say what they want to in 3 minutes. It sounds like it ain't a lot of time, but technically, if you go to Richland County, they do. And there's a little bit of grace in there, too, if they understand you're about through. They let you finish. If they understand you're not, they kind of buzz you and tell you you're done. One of the other things, too, is that we need to make a decision in something. In the years past, we have never required a sign-up sheet. We didn't have a lot of people. They just came to the meeting. They spoke. And people complained that they were speaking to us after we voted, so we added that presentation by citizens for agenda item so they could speak before we voted. Whether we should have took the other one off at that time or not, left it. But there's also a lot of towns, and some of those I agree with, some of them I don't, but they tell you, you got to be signed up on that sheet when the meeting starts, or some within 5 minutes of the meeting starting, some within 5 minutes of the meeting after. But you got to be signed up on those sheets. If you're not signed up on those sheets, you don't speak. For the one that happens at the beginning of the meeting, that's probably workable. At the one at the end of the meeting, it may be that something comes up during the meeting that somebody wants to address. And that one, we'd have to figure out, maybe leave that sheet there until that time. And then the people have to sign up on it. And it tells they have to speak to an issue. A lot of the towns say you have to speak to an issue, even at the end of the meeting. And what that does is if whatever's on our meeting that night, if somebody comes up and says, well, I don't like the way y'all voted, blah, 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 they don't know that at the beginning of the meeting. They don't know that till after. So somewhere in there, you got to give them a time to, say, hey, I want to talk about that. But at some point, too, you got to cut it. Otherwise, they could be talking about everything under the moon. And they have definitions like it has to be something relevant to the town, the future of the town, the best of the town, or to the town. But anyway, think about all that stuff, and that's why I put that on there, or Kathy did, and that's why I wanted to, so that we can think about all this stuff. We got 4 weeks, I think, before we meet again. And so when we come back, we can at least halfway have an idea of what we think is good and bad and merge it all together into something that we can all vote on.
One more thing. Your letter was excellent, and I appreciate it. I thank you. It might be better to enforce it after the election, because we're now entering prime political, and I'm the only one not running up here. So it might be hard to do, but we need to keep it in mind and try to go by it when we come to, decision of what we're going to do. But I appreciate you writing it and letting us have it. Thank you.
And our meetings have kind of got out of line, not just up here, but out there as well. But, it's easy to say, well, this is okay, but this isn't. But once you kind of start down that road, it's easy for somebody to say, well, I said this that time and I got away with it. I'm going to say this next time. And it starts getting inching over to where all of a sudden it's, bad. I think you mentioned it before, we're adults. We should be acting like adults. And we should be able to, not just us, but everybody, public as well, speak about something they're for or against and then be done with it. And, if we lose, we lose. If we win, we win, and move on from there. So I think we do need to address it. And I'm kind of very glad you brought it up because I've been waiting, you might say, to get to a point where somebody other than us and me or whoever thought it was getting out of line. Now the public's brought it to our attention, so I think it's time we actually do something.
Mr. Mayor, may I be allowed to speak out of order? I just have 3 quick points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, as long as nobody objects, that's fine.
Does anybody object? I'll sit down. Just really quick, Mike Ward again. I want to point out that that I did use Robert's rules as my basis. I'm very actively involved in Toastmasters International. I travel around to different groups teaching Robert's rules. Sometimes we call it parliamentary procedure if we want to bore people to death. I had a list about as long as my arm of different rules that I thought we could incorporate into the town. I reduced it down to the 5 that you have in your letter because I believe in starting small and growing. So those, while they're soft and they don't sound exactly like Robert's rules, that was intentional, but they are based off of Robert's rules. Councilman Pouliot, your comment about the clapping and the booing, you were spot on. I think during the proclamation, when everybody applauded afterwards, that was completely appropriate. But when we're applauding or we're booing to intimidate somebody, that's what we need to avoid as a council. And you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, Richland County, Lexington County does it, Lakes Ridge 5 School District does it. I attended their school board meeting yesterday. There was a lovely young lady sitting just off to the side here. She had a little timer, and she had a bright yellow card. On it was written 30 seconds. And at the beginning of the public commentary, the chairman said, you have 3 minutes to speak. You'll get notified when you have 30 seconds, and then a timer goes off. It's very simple. That way you're not involved with it. There can't be any kind of disagreements. The other thing that I thought was awesome, and I did post this on Facebook because I thought it was great of the chairman. There was a young lady up there from Chapin High School. They won 2 national championships on their dance team. She was reading a prepared statement. Her timer went off. She was polite, and she stopped. The chairman said, I see you've prepared a statement. You're speaking on behalf of many people. Please finish. And I think that our meetings can be that way. So that's why I recommended that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Next item is discussion on the referendum. I do have some. I'm not going to discuss them tonight because it's on here just for discussion. The one that was brought up is not one of them. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is the filing date is for running for office is August what through what? It ends August 30th.
15.
And we have to have, if there's going to be referendums, they have to be to the Lexington County election on the 30th by 12. We meet again on August 20th. And so,
You have
if
to
we
be
want to
prepared.
do referendums, we need to be thinking about them for the next 4 weeks. And then when we come to that meeting, we need to be voting that night. I do have some that I want to put on, and I'll bring them up that night, but I didn't want to bring them up and then everybody go, oh, I need to think about this, and then we don't have another meeting. So just as, I'll call it fair warning or whatever you want to say, we need to be thinking about that, and then y'all may have some, you may not, you may care, you may not. But if you do, we need to talk about them or get them on the agenda and then vote on them that night. It'll be a one-time vote because they just require an approval. So that's kind of why I put it on there so we all know.
The next meeting is after the filing begins.
Yeah,
The filing is August 16th, and the next meeting's August 20th.
right.
So,
But it doesn't have to be in the county until filing closes.
yeah.
Yeah, the
which is
30th.
The 30th.
So we would have to do them that 16th or whatever, say 20th, that meeting.
20th,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other discussion? And the next one, only reason I put this on there, not that I'm for it or against it, I do have a bunch of reservations about one. But the state has tried to, for a year ago, tried to pass one, they didn't get it passed. They have a 2-year cycle. Last year was the first year of the 2-year cycle. They tried to pass it again. They didn't get enough votes in the Senate. What is happening is a lot of the people at the coastal areas are passing them, and their state house representatives and senators from those areas are not signing and not supporting until those get passed. And then they're going to come in and say, okay, well, I don't care anymore. Y'all can pass one. I'll sign it. I don't care as long as it's not retroactive. All of them that are on the books are going to be honored. Anything not is going to be not. That's what they're leaning towards right now, trying to get passed. Probably not great government to do it that way. It's kind of like, oh, well, it don't affect me. I don't care. I'll vote for it. And that's what they're trying to do to get their votes. They didn't get them. They're going to be bringing it back up when they come in session in January. And by then, other places have going to have passed them. And those senators and elected people are probably going to go, it don't matter to me, do whatever, I'll sign off on it. Anybody that hadn't passed one by that time won't never be able to pass one, probably. All that to say, Lexington has just put it on their radar and started discussing it. Richland County just passed first reading. And, you know, if it is anything council wants to do, they need to talk about it. They need, we can put it on the agenda and do it. They're all different. Some at the beach ban plastic bags and styrofoam. I think Arcadia Lakes or Forest Acres bans styrofoam.
And plastic bags.
I'm drinking out of a styrofoam cup. I got 50 of these things at home. I like them. If you go to a restaurant and eat and take out order, they put it in a styrofoam do trick. They also put it in a plastic bag. And a lot of people use those plastic bags for dog poops and whatever else.
Trash can liners.
Trash can liners. So, you know, I don't know. All I know is if council wants to do something, they're going to have to do it probably before January. It may not pass again. I don't know. But they may have enough other votes if Richland County and Lexington County and a few other municipalities pass theirs and counties. They may have enough other votes from senators to say, I don't care in my area. Yeah, let's ban. And that's the only reason I put that on there, just for our knowledge, so that if it's something we want to look at, and at the same time, get the discussion out there. I think there's a good reason for banning them. You know, the sea turtles and the oceans and all that kind of stuff. But it's also, you know, if you go to, I want to say a drive up, a lot of those places put food in a plastic bag. I was at Matthias one day. They put their takeout orders in a styrofoam thing and put it in a plastic bag. And so now all these smaller places got to react to that. The bigger places, you know, the grocery stores along the coast, they've already did whatever they do. So I know places can react and move on. But again, I don't know. I just thought we needed to know about it, think about it, and then we can decide if we want to do anything or not do anything. And let the citizen give us some feedback too as to they think we should or shouldn't. Any other discussion? Next is executive session, and we do have a contractual matter on the possible land purchase by the town. We can go in there and discuss it and then come back out and let everybody know. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Make a motion.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor, do so with show of hands. All right.
Take your mics off.
I say, that's the law. I said, that means you're gonna make $50,000 easy. I said, I mean, you're gonna make $50,000 in 3 months. I said, that's a lot of money.
Must have had one guy.
I don't know what it was. He didn't know what he was doing.
But see, most of those companies want to get it. Like we just had Canty out of the house. 27 years of the house. And they dig out a 2x2, fill it with rock, and put cement in it. And one day they had two teams out there. They were trying to dig.
Oh, yeah.
7 holes. But they got done in 3 days.
Yep.
They got done, they got out of there. Those guys, the quicker they're done, the more money they make.
Right back into Chadford, and they're redoing those, some concrete roads back in there. Oh, are they? Through Richland County. Okay. Tax. And you'll see 15 guys out there. And they'll rip a section the size of this room out, and they'll pour concrete right behind it. And they're rocking the roll.
So they're replacing it with concrete?
Yes. Fine. You've got a concrete road trying to stop it.
Is it a foundation issue? Why you can't move it to an asphalt road?
And then you've got to, well, with the concrete road, it's not all bad, so they're taking out sections that are bad.
I got you.
So if you do asphalt, you gotta take it all out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Basically, and then, I think they put a lot of these concrete roads in because the soil's so bad back in that area. There's a lot of, groundwater and stuff, so they're doing it to last longer.
Gotcha.
So if
I
you got
figured-
groundwater issues, I mean, if you're preparing for asphalt,
Yeah.
you spend a ton of cash.
I figured there had to be a reason for concrete roads. Other than just maybe they were old school.
I think they were trying to do the right thing.
But it also makes sense that they're just replacing parts of it.
Yeah, so that's what they're gonna do, is just replace parts of it. Now, replacing parts of it, sometimes it's 80% over it. It's a lot.
Well, that's like down on, over Columbiana extends down there, down over to Broad River Road. You know, they patched it up and then came and tore the whole thing up.
Yeah. Well, when you do an asphalt road, that's what you do. You'll come in, take out the bad sections. So you go down deeper and put some, soil to be able to get some concrete or something down in there. That's to stabilize that soil. But just repaving over a bad spot, it's not fixing what's underneath.
Yeah,
That's
well,
why it's so bad.
That's why we had the people out to fix the foundation.
The same thing.
Yeah.
So you gotta fix what's under it first.
So that's what they just, they fixed that.
So
and
they
then
always
came
fix,
back.
yeah, and then they come back and do it.
Okay.
So you'll always see the patches done 6 months, sometimes a year ahead.
Huh, okay.
And then they'll come out and do it.
Oh. Well, we can buy the land now. Georgia gone. We'll just tell him we bought it while he's gone. Where's the? Let me do. Oh. Everybody got their mic on and all that fun stuff.
Yes, sir.
We are back from executive session. No votes were taken, no decision was made. And for the most part, we're not interested in what we talked about. And next item is adjournment. Is there a
I
motion
make a motion, we adjourn.
and a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.